Okay, so Kim, first of all, just how are you doing today?
Chris, I am so good and super happy to be back to pick up this conversation where we left off. So I want to thank you always. I start with love and gratitude. I want to thank you for inviting me back. I feel like we could just kind of keep this rolling for a very long time with all the talking points. So it's my pleasure to know you, and it's my pleasure to be back again. I feel like we're friends at this point. So thank you.
No problem at all. So, just to recap for the listeners, where do you want to begin today? So, how do you want to start? Is there anything you want to just make the listener aware of on the back of the last podcast we did to take us into today's topic?
Yes. So I think that our second conversation here is kind of a standalone from the first. So if I could start with a brief introduction. And my name is Kim Tang. And I think I described to you before, I'm not even sure, that kind of like who I am and what I do and how I serve has expanded so vastly that I actually use kind of a symbol to represent all the ways that I offer support. So if you know what a Venn diagram is, a Venn diagram is two circles that are side by side, except they've moved so close together that there's some overlap in between, like an almond shape. So on one side of the circle is all things yoga, and on the other side of the circle is all things spirit. And of course, the overlap are for those who understand that they are one and the same. And so, in the way of yoga, which is primarily what we're talking about today with biomechanics, there are many things that I do. I have an entire video platform that actually expands upon, frankly, every single thing we're about to talk about today. It's really profound. I am going to tell you that really nobody sees it, says it, or does it like I do, except that I am coming from what I'm going to call the knowing in my tissues. This is not something I lifted off the pages of a book. This is something that is known by me in my body. And by the way, more importantly, in my mind. And by the way, more importantly, in my spirit. And all the things that we talked about in the first conversation. Our first conversation, by the way, we should refer back to that. And that's on your podcast channel, right? Just the audio. So maybe the listeners would like to start with that or go back and listen to that after they listen to this. And either way is fine. I'm coming to you from the high desert of Southern California, where we have a private event center for the healing arts and spiritual sciences. And so, again, there's a video platform for learning everything that we're talking about today. I do private sessions. We have 3-day in-person events here at the Yucca Shala. It's another YS Yoga Spirit Yucca Shala. Seems to be lighting up in my life. And I should mention again, I am part of a collaboration of a global teacher training certification program, and that is with Yoga Sport World. So everything that I am, you can find on kimtangyoga.com, and the certification program, which has satellites in Prague, Australia, Mexico City, and Berkeley, San Francisco area. That's yogasportworld.com. So all the spirit stuff is there on the website. Check that out as well. And then we could probably start right there. I'd appreciate it if you'd throw up my pictures, and we'll have that early conversation about what they're looking at, and more importantly, who I'm talking to. This is going to be a really big conversation. So, hey, I love that we're doing this on video.
Okay, so
Yes.
is the one that you'd like to particularly like to start with?
Well, that's fine. Okay, here we are. This is going to be a really important talking point today. Now, what I want to tell you is, while this posture is called bow pose, Dhanurasana, it's actually full bow pose, so Purna Dhanurasana. I want to tell you that I'm going to be a myth buster right now. I want to fact check people already, because they're going to look at this and they're going to think to themselves, oh no, well, she's like crazy flexible. She's too advanced. I can't learn from her. I'm not advanced enough for her, and so on and so on. And what I want to tell everyone that's listening and watching is that that could not be farther from the truth. And I think you're going to know that as we get into the conversations and especially the pictures. So I'm going to call it the master teacher can take a broken, scared, stiff, calcified, maybe with even prosthetics, 70-year-old, and also a flexible 20-year-old, girl, and in the same room, and have them both feel that the teacher is talking directly to them. So the greater teacher can address a greater range of bodies. So let me be very clear right now while you're showing this picture, because it's about to get deeper. Let me be very clear right now that I do not only teach advanced students. I teach anyone and everyone. You and I talked about it last time, and that is that if you reside in a musculoskeletal system in a field of gravity, I am talking to you. So I have these big picture concepts that apply to all asana in the history of all yoga and all lineages. And oh yeah, I should mention that as just part of the introduction while we're speaking into it. I am still currently the head coach of the International Yoga Sports Federation. And I want to tell you that I have spent a couple of decades crafting this highly specialized approach to all of asana creation and execution, of knowing exactly what to be, what position to be in, and what to open, what to strengthen, order of operations, and which is the command that you send from the brain through the spine, and with everything that you need and nothing that you don't. So there's about to be a lot going on here, and I've taken this highly specialized niche level of teaching, and I'm now availing it to literally the whole of humanity. So again, anyone and everyone, I am available to anyone and everyone. They can learn from me. Okay, good. So this posture, let's just start talking. This posture, everyone would say to me, oh my God, you're so flexible. And I would always think to myself, actually, you have no idea how strong you have to be to do this posture. And ultimately, in our practice, for example, women tend to step into a yoga room being a little more flexible than they are strong. And men tend to step into a yoga room being a little more strong than they are flexible. And in the way that I teach you, you will use your strength to create space in between bone joints through which you can express range of motion. And by using the strength, you get stronger. So in other words, your strength and your flexibility will become even and equal, and then they will both increase together. So already, I'm going to tell you with all certainty that in my technique, you can have strength without rigidity, and you can have flexibility without instability. So these are a couple of the talking points we'll be using. I think that last time we looked at this picture, there was something that I zeroed in on, and that is that, of course, the mechanics of the spine. We have the cervical spine, which has 7 cervical vertebrae. That's the neck spine. And then you have the thoracic spine. The thoracic spine is defined by where the ribs attach. And the ribs are just the bony encasement to protect your vital organs of the heart and lungs. It stands to reason that the thoracic spine on most people is very rigid. In fact, for some people, like a steel rod. And there's an argument that there's a reason for that, just in terms of evolution. We're protecting the heart and the lungs, but it is widely held out there by people who claim to be experts that you cannot change the thoracic spine. And right now you're looking at actually me as the proof that you can. And by the way, should, coming from someone who has done it. Then you have the lower back, the lumbar spine. There are 5 lumbar vertebrae. You have the sacrum, and that's 5 vertebrae fused together, kind of the bony plate of the pelvis. And then the coccyx, which is 4 vertebrae fused together, and they don't articulate the way the other ones do, but you can tip it, point it, and we will. We'll be talking about that today. Now, the neck spine, it might surprise you, is the most flexible on the most people out of all of the aspects of the spine. Most people guess lower back, it's actually the neck. The lumbar, the lower back, is the next most flexible aspect of the spine for the most people. But most people are very, very rigid there in the thoracic spine where the ribs attach. So what I really spoke into when we talked before and showed you in this photo is that if you were to zoom in on that, and I don't know if you can, but if you can, go ahead and do it. If you can zoom in on that, oh, that's beautiful. What I want you to see is not just the creases in the mesh fabric or costume, but actually the creases in the skin on my thoracic spine. And what I'm showing you in this photo is that every single how will I say that, joint space is in motion. So the entire spine is bending evenly and equally, and spaciously in alignment. And that is a very, very therapeutic and, by the way, sustainable practice. I think we should probably speak into right now those discs in between the bone joints in the spine, because you have a section in your YouTube channel that, by the way, I just love, and I'm inviting all of my listeners to jump on your channel, subscribe, join, like, comment, and follow. It's a great platform. I appreciate our collaboration. And I want to remind everyone that those discs in between the vertebrae are mostly kind of fibrous cartilage tissue that have very little of their own blood supply. Some people call it avascular. So backward bending, and specifically therapeutic backward bending, is like nutrient for the spine, because you're actually compressing, kind of blanching the blood out of the area. And then when you come out of the posture, there's this return of high pressure, oxygen rich blood. If you're in a hot room, pumping hard through dilated vessels, and the circulation taking away any inflammation and just flooding those discs with nutrient. So we have so many talking points here, but the most important ones for you to look at are actually the flexibility in every single aspect of the spine. There's one other important talking point here, because today I think we're also going to get into shoulder mobility. And something that we talked about before, you can zoom out into the full view of the picture if you're able, and thank you for that. And something that we talked about before was that in a yoga practice, in any yoga discipline lineage, the difference between what you might call a beginner level backbend expression versus an advanced backbend expression is not just the depth of the posture, I'm going to say including the evenness of the spine, but also involving the shoulders. And there is a very deep and intimate relationship between neck, thoracic spine, and shoulders. These advanced backbends will require that the shoulders are in full turn. And you can see in this one that the shoulders are in full turn. It starts by setting it up with a very specific grip so that you can access that. And then when the armpits are fully front facing with the torso square, you know that the shoulders are in full turn. Now, shoulders tend to take strain strain for an upper back that is not bending. And so there are many ways in which the two kind of play off of each other. So when the scapulae flex, they're taking the strain because the thoracic spine is not bending. And so I'm always joining forces for the students between the shoulders and the upper back, helping them create space so they can express range of motion into it. The more the upper back can bend, the less strain on the shoulders, and the more the shoulders can turn, the deeper the spine can get. Okay, great. Talking points on this one?
So how do you progress this? So if somebody said, I want to achieve this posture, where would you start and how do you achieve that?
I love your question. And your question, the answer to your question is multifaceted. The first thing I want to tell you is the answer that I gave you before, and that is with every single person who walks into my space, I have a formula of start where you're at. And those pictures are really going to come to life when we get to that part of the conversation, actually showing some spine and shoulders work with a student that I had very recently. So always, I will help them start where they're at, do what they can. And like I say, always and only with breath and with form. And then I'm going to do what I call spoon feed the millimeters. So I'm going to have a quick assessment of the shoulders, of the neck, the upper back, the lumbar, the hips. Very important. Can you actually look at this picture and gain a sense of how important hips are to backward bending? So in the yoga realm, we call backward bending compression, and that's compression from the dorsal perspective. But if you look at that spine on the, on the back side, if you were to take, for example, a measuring tape, and you were to measure specifically in that position from, say, atlas axis, kind of where the base of my skull meets my neck, just down to the sacrum, it would be very, very short. It would be compressed. We call that compression in yoga. But look at the opposite. Look at the front side body. And if you were to measure, say, from my chin all the way through center on my entire front side body, all the way to, say, pelvic floor, pubic bone, that's going to be a very, very long measurement by comparison. So the deeper you go in your spine with backward bending, which we call compression, which means the backside is shortened, then the front side will be lengthened commensurately. And by the way, you're not just stretching muscles. So I was so delighted to find out when you have a soft tissue practice, because we're not just stretching muscles when we're creating flexibility, we're actually also stretching fascia and connective tissue, ligaments, tendons, and by the way, nerves. And so veins, arteries, nerves, skin, every aspect of your being is actually lengthening. All of the layers are lengthening, not just the muscles. So again, we can go anywhere with that. But let's see, my personal experience is that when you said, how do you get started with this? My personal experience is that I I realized the progress, and I'm going to call it from the top down and the bottom up until they met in the middle. So I want to tell you a fun story, and that is that there was a time in my life when I would travel to Los Angeles for kind of an international event where I would find my peers, and I would always want to just kind of brainstorm, thought storm, spine storm, if you will, things that were going on. And I talked to another yoga coach at that time, and I just showed him a picture of my back bend. And I said, I don't even want to ask you a question. It might limit the answer that you offer. So look at this picture and tell me what I need to hear. And he said to me, center spine. And it was just like my mind was blown, and all the light bulbs and all the bells and whistles went off. And I will tell you that this is an Indian yogi. And so I said, oh, definitely. I know exactly what you mean by that. So what should I do? And he said, He said, hot butter massage. And I was a little like, okay, well, that's not really going to help. I'm not like a newborn Indian baby, right? So hot butter massage, like I'm going to have to find some more technique. So I thought it was hilarious, but I got what I needed from that. My spine is a very long spine, and it needs to be divided into 3 parts, not just 2. So all of my teachers up until that moment had always said to me, oh, upper back, and then, oh, lower back, and then, oh, upper back, and then, oh, lower back. Nobody ever said those magic words to me, center spine. So when I heard it, I just got to work and I got it. So the flexibility came from the top down, meaning my neck spine, remember 7 cervical vertebrae. My neck spine was already very flexible, and probably I had some movement and range of motion in, say, thoracic, which is T1, 2, maybe something like that. And then from the bottom up, from the sacrum to the lumbar vertebrae, 5, L5, L4, L3. I probably had a lot of range of motion there, but probably from about T3 to about L3 were pretty rigid. And so I just worked it from the top down, moving from T1 to T2 and T2 to T3 and T3 to T4, and from the bottom up, going from L5 to L4 to L3 to L2 to L1 to T12 to T11, 10, 9, and so on, until they met in the middle. And that actually is a very exact example of how it happened for me. Just in the way of sacred geometry and human evolution, fun fact, that is that the very most rigid aspect of your spine is actually about T5. And the bone density there is just a little bit higher, and the bone joints there are just a little bit closer, and all of that is designed to protect your heart, which is just the most kind of beautiful, exquisite, universal law of order, that are literally our bone structure is designed to protect our vital organs. And so, yeah, I think I answered your question in 2 different ways. One is, where do they start? They start where they're at. What order does it go in? Well, my answer, it goes from the top down and the bottom up. Remember, I'm always sharing myself with you in the form of knowing in my tissues. It's not something I could ever lift off a book or just repeat as hearsay. Everything I'm telling you, I'm sharing myself with you in the form of.
Is there a next picture you'd like to go to, or do you want me to just bring which?
Yeah, let's just go through them and pick up some talking points. And let's say that for today's conversation, we're really zeroing in on, okay, well, we're really going to zero in on spine and shoulders. So this one is a whole lot about, by the way, spine and hips. And I'll tell you, though, that the big picture concepts that I'm teaching you are in practice in every photo that you're about to see. And because, look, I'm going to put it in air quotes, and I'm going to tell you, I was not born that way. I was not born naturally flexible. I was not a 20-year-old ballerina who kind of walked into the yoga room like that. I was a hardworking person who kind of like figured it out. And I figured out that the magic formula here is to use your strength to create space. Sometimes that's called using your strength to create length. So I've never even worked to create flexibility. I've worked to create space in my body, and I've worked to create length in the spine. And inherently, there's space there for you to move into, and that's what we call flexibility. And the reason that that matters is because when you're kind of trying to force flexibility into joints that have no space between them, then ultimately you're grinding on the cartilage. That was something that we talked about before. And that's how people end up getting, say, arthritis or loss of cartilage, bone on bone. And by the way, especially compression in the lumbar spine, sciatica. So maybe we'll save that as a talking point for a little bit later. But by the way, we can actually heal those things through the practice of yoga. So not only are we using our strength to create space to express range of motion into, but we're also strengthening the muscles that support the space in the joints, and by the way, in a position of alignment. So we can rehabituate the tone, we can give the joints more nutrient, the discs more nutrient, more strength with space, and so on and so on. All of these are big picture concepts inherent in my teaching that are demonstrated in these postures. So this one that you're looking at on the right is just kind of the progression of that first one that we looked at. So in that bow that we looked at, that's actually the setup for this, another expression of the full bow pose. And that's a, that's a pretty deep advanced little yoga posture for sure. And yeah, fun for me to see. Thanks. Let's see what's next.
The quality is not quite there on the picture, but this is in, all of the poses are very impressive, but this one from a strength point of view for the balance and the wrist strength is very impressive.
Now, I appreciate you saying that, because let's speak into that. This is a tricky little balancing posture called one arm bow-legged peacock. And there it is. And I want to tell you that, first of all, like I wish I would have also given you a picture from the side, but let me just speak into it. The toes are hooked under the hip bones for simplicity's sake. So my toes are grabbing my hip bones like fingers grabbing, you know, my feet are acting like hands in a way. Now, a lot of people look at that and they go, oh, ouch, your knees. No, first of all, no hot poker to the knee, no ouch in the knee. So I want to tell you that this position begins at the psoas. This psoas is a muscle group that connects the upper body to the lower body. And it starts at T12, the thoracic spine, the last thoracic vertebra, T12, L1, L2, L3, L4, L5, through the hip joint. So psoas in through the hip joint, into the belly of the quad, into the knees, into the shins, into the ankles, into the feet. Every single thing from the waist down front side is lengthening here. So it's not forcing it in the knees. It's all systems working together in the lengthening process. Now, since you mentioned the strength of the balance, and, you know, like I have on my Facebook, I have videos of me doing, 30-second or 1-minute holds of this, and in complete stillness. You have to be very, very flexible to get in that position, but you have to be very, very strong to hit it and hold it in stillness against gravity for a solid 30 seconds or a minute at a time, and 10 sets in a row. And, this is the knowing in my tissues from which I share. So what I want to talk about with respect to the strength, first of all, another big picture concept, strength is inherent in balance. In opposing forces, there is tension. In equal and opposite tension, there is balance. In balance, there's stillness. In stillness, there's silence. And in silence, there is space. There it is again. Space is always the goal. Now, the strength that's required here is not just the strength of the arm. It's not just the strength of the arm and the back working together. This is the strength of the entire body in equal and opposite tension, stretching forward and stretching back until you hit that point of equilibrium. And by the way, another big picture concept is that gravity is your very best teacher, and it tells you exactly when to lift in all of these peacocks. So in a yoga lineage, in all lineages, there are any number of versions of this posture. They usually have both hands down, so this is quite an advanced one. But there's there's a one-legged peacock, and there's a peacock lotus, and there's a straight body peacock, and there's a bow-legged peacock, and one-arm peacock, and all different versions of peacock. And this one happens to be probably the hardest one that you could possibly fathom. And what happens is you get in the right position, and you slide forward until the forearm there is the fulcrum, if you will, of like a seesaw. And you have basically as much weight in front of that fulcrum as you have behind it. And that's what I call gravity is your best teacher, and it tells you when to lift, because when you have as much weight in front of you as you have behind you, it becomes, I mean, can I just say, less effortful, more effortless. So it's a lot easier. Now, can you pull yourself up into a peacock if you're, for example, if your arms are a little too high and you have more lower body weight behind you than you have upper body weight in front of you? You can, but now you're muscling it, you're fighting it. There's unnecessary struggle and strain in a posture, and that's how you know if you're in the right position. So I probably was literally in this front-facing video, I probably was actually talking to someone while I was doing this. So in other words, when it's known by you, when the right position is known by you, it's far less effort. And the strength that is involved is not just one muscle group, it's all muscle groups working together. Hey, that would be cool to bring into this platform. And that is that I love to think of yoga postures as kind of like a class is, would we say, a symphony? Each of the body parts is a part of the orchestra, and the mind is the conductor. And it's up to the mind, the conductor, to synchronize and harmonize all the moving parts. So that's really interesting, because how about two of them? There are two ways that I define a very, very high level of practice. And right now I'm not talking about the depth of your back bend. Right now I'm talking about a high level of self-awareness. And there are two things that I like to say. One of them is to be able to contract every single thing that you need to support yourself in that posture, and more importantly, to be able to relax everything else, which, by the way, in every single posture is your face, your mind, and your breath. And in back bends, mostly your neck. And the other way that I define a very high level of practice is to be able to, I'm going to call it, single out the pieces and command them independently. And what that might mean is really contract the deltoids and the lats, but really relax the neck, for example. Two body parts that are side by side, but you have such command that you can single out the pieces and command them independently. This one contract, this one right next to it, relax. That's a deep level of knowing, of self-knowing. So, and we get that from a yoga practice. Yeah, thanks for letting me bring all that into it. It's a very expansive, for me, invigorating conversation.
Fantastic. Would you like to digress into the shoulder case study that you wanted to go through?
Yeah, sure. Let's flip through what you have there. We'll stop on each one briefly and see if there's anything there, and then we'll just make our way to it. Okay, here we are. Okay, now this is a student who, let's stay right there. So you've asked me, how do I even get started? And I say, it's a start where you're at. And this is exactly what he came in with, and that is exactly where we begin. Now, the very first thing that I'm always going to do is introduce some exercises in what I call traction. And there's something I want to say here, and that is that one time I had a student who had a very negative emotional association with the word traction, because she herself had been in a traumatic accident and was put in the hospital where she experienced what was called traction. And so I want to be clear, this is not that. Traction is a way that you can actually bring your body into alignment from the ground up So ultimately, from the feet through the fingertips in one straight line, straight spine, where every muscle is supporting the bone joints in a position of alignment, strong, and space in between bone joints. And there are drills that we do for that. Yes, thank you for that. Do you remember in the first conversation, I introduced this to you. This might be the more important place to start. I consider, and this is the hallmark of my teaching, of asana teaching, I consider that there are 5 ranges of motion of the spine. And I'll define them quickly. Number 1, I'm going to call traction. And traction is the foundation for every other range of motion. The second range of motion, in no particular order, backward bending, and then forward compression, which is forward rounding, and then lateral flexion, which is kind of like side bending, and then twisting. So there are 5 ranges of motion of the spine. And the reason that I break it down this way is because now we can categorize every single posture in the history of every posture there ever has been in every lineage of yoga there ever has been. We can define every single posture according to range of motion of the spine. The stretching poses, not just leg stretching, but spine stretching, entire body stretching, whether it's a straight line, straight spine, or whether it's a jackknife posture, those stretching poses being considered traction. So we need that as a range of motion by definition, because it requires command of the mind. It requires contraction. It's not our natural relaxed state of being. So the first thing I'm going to do is teach traction. And there are many ways I like to do it. And I start just by showing a relaxed S curve in the spine, just kind of slouchy, hunchy, normal, natural, relaxed posture. And I kind of study what that is going to be on them. And then I show them how to bring the body weight back into the heels and pitch the tailbone into neutral, and every muscle surrounding the pelvis, stabilizing the pelvis in that position, and then pelvic floor in and up, lower abs in and up, navel in and up, diaphragm in and up, crown stretch up. And then I show them how to use the arms, which I'm going to call use the upper body strength, to create space between bone joints in the spine. So now when we add the arms to it, we can traction the spine further. Now, not only that, we're talking about shoulders at the same time by virtue of looking at these photos in this moment. And I want to tell you that, so this particular student would not be able to bring the arms directly overhead so that the arms were in line with the spine. And so in the position of traction, I'm going to call it from, well, the entire spine through the crown. But what you can see visually is from the neck down, he's in a position of traction, except that he couldn't get his arms overhead without making the compromises that are very universal. And so here's what I had him do. Oh, okay, good. We're gonna get to even expand a little further in this conversation by starting with these photos. I want you to see something right now. I have him with his fingers interlaced, release the index fingers, thumbs crossed. This particular grip is called a half moon grip. I call it a half moon grip. It's used in multiple postures. It's what we could call a beginner level grip, but you're stretching from the shoulders through the fingertips as if you're trying to touch the ceiling. So the arms are not only straight, but eventually locked, and not only locked, but eventually shoulder block, which is what I refer to as the space in the shoulders. Now, remember, we're not going to try to force movement, range of motion into joints that have no space in them. We're only going to try to create space so that we can then express range of motion into the space that's there. So the reason that I'm holding up a stick in that one on the right is because I'm drawing a line for your eyes of the trajectory. See the angle where the torso meets the arms, the angle at the armpit there. I'm basically just drawing that angle with the stick. That's what I'm going to call the trajectory. That's his current range of motion. Now, in this position, I want him to keep his body in that therapeutic position of traction. And I want him just to, number one, breathe and stretch from the shoulders through the fingertips along that same exact line of trajectory. So you say, where do you start them? Well, I start them where they're at. Well, this is what that means, and this is what that looks like. So I want him to basically stretch farther and farther and farther in that line that the stick is drawing. The more he stretches from the shoulders through the fingertips, the more space he has in his shoulders. The more space he has in his shoulders, the more he's going to be able to move into it, which means bring his arms overhead. And that is without compromising the remainder of the spine, the torso, the body, the hips, everything as it's set up in its position of alignment. So first I had him do traction drills, and now I'm having him do shoulder drills. And I think what I want to do is add another photo of the same student, because I worked with him in multiple ways. And remember on that one, so can we slide that to the right so that we can still have a glimpse of the middle picture? Boy, you're good. Well done. Yes, yes, and yes. Now, what's the difference? What's a primary difference between the middle picture and the picture on the right? Well, I have his hands wider. Okay, this is huge. So let me speak into that. There's this thing I like to do. I call it backbending 101, but it's really a demonstration of how the shoulders relate to the upper back and neck, and how the hips relate to the lower back. And of course, then there's a conversation about knees and hips. So if I were to stand with my arms overhead and my hands very, very, very wide, and by the way, my armpits kind of turn so that they're facing outward, that's going to be kind of the least challenging of back bends to my thoracic spine. As I bring my armpits front facing without bringing my hands any closer together, now I'm no longer, I'm going to call it borrowing from the shoulders. I've now isolated the bend to be in the spine. And then when I bring my hands closer, 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 there's more challenge to the upper spine. There's a direct congruence with the feet, the width of the feet, meaning, and the feet turned out, meaning the hips are in external rotation. That means borrowing from the hips, less challenge to the low back. So turning the feet in so the inside lines are parallel is now no longer borrowing from the hips. And then the feet come closer, 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 increasing the challenge to the lumbar spine and the back bend. So these parts all work together. So what I'm really speaking into is that in that middle picture, he has his hands together. He's gripping, his fingers are interlaced. On the next one, he has a stick in his hand, and his hands are farther apart, less challenge to the thoracic spine, less strain for the shoulders to receive. So when I saw where he was at, I handed him the stick, and with the same instructions, I asked him, push that stick away from you, push it away from you, push from the shoulders through the fingertips, push that stick away from you without compromising the rest of the body, by the way. We need to, do you remember when we talked about what I'm going to call my simple formula for muscles? If you use them, they get strong. If you stretch them, they get long. That's pretty much all muscles on every body, and they get strong in whatever position you strengthen them in. So we really want to strengthen the spine here in its position of strength, spacious alignment, while we create space in the shoulders and strengthen the muscles that support the space. So all the parts are working together. So on this one, I brought his hands apart and I had him do the same thing. So he pushed that stick away from him, and I'm having him push it away and pull it up, push it away, push it away, push it away, pull it up, up, a little more, a little more. And I'm giving him all the cues, and he's doing it, and he's getting an increased range of motion. And by the way, I like to say that I want them to kind of blow their own minds. He blew his own mind with being able to get his arms actually higher, higher, higher and higher than he ever had before. And so let's, is there anything you want to chime in on, add to, clarify with that before we go on?
No, that's great. That's really
beautiful. Okay, so I love this. Let's put those side by side. This is important because I had him lie down on his back in this one, and you can see that now the one that you just put up with the one on the right, these are congruent. Just one is standing and one is lying down, but I'm having him absolutely in the position of traction lying down on the floor. And I did not elevate his knees or his feet. I have him lying down on the floor, knitting the rib cage, closing, folding, anything that you want to call it, the bottom ribs. and head is in line with the spine by virtue of the fact that he's lying down flat on his back. And now look at that. First, I just put the stick in his hand and I had him just push that stick away from him. Push it away, push it away, push it away, push it away. In other words, in that position of spacious alignment in the spine, I'm having him isolate the shoulders, create space in the shoulders. And I am giving the gentlest and most knowing suggestion of moving into the space by just lightly and barely holding the stick and taking it in that position on the left down toward the floor, which in that position on the right would be, you know, arms up, arms in line with the spine. So I like to call that no angle 180. So we're actually going to eliminate that angle at the armpits. So he's pushed that stick away from him. And now without compromising the spine or making any other changes, he can actually get that, I'm going to call it the stick closer to the floor than you see in the one on the wall. So standing upright, where I couldn't reach it, by the way. So, so I put him down on the floor. So let's speak into that. What would you like to contribute to this conversation with these photos?
So with the picture on the left here, if somebody, say for example to you, says I can start to feel my lower back pulling, or I'm getting some lower back pain because they're not used to this excessive extension, what would you do in that situation to help them, or how would you cue them?
Yeah, I really appreciate it. The first thing I do, remember, is teach them the traction, and I help them find exactly what they need to contract. So I take them step by step through that process of feet together, toes and heels touching, and the body weight back in the heels. This is the most important part that becomes very relevant. Pitch the tailbone down. I call that tailbone in neutral. And remember that part where I said, every muscle surrounding the pelvis, stabilizing the pelvis. What that means is contract your quads, contract your glutes, contract inner thighs, pelvic floor, everything in and up through center in the spine, contract. So you could call it Mula Bandha, you could call it Kegel, anything that they kind of identify with. Lower abs, pull everything in and up through center, navel in and up through center, diaphragm in and up through center. And by the way, there's another part of this. So where I have him on the wall in this image on the right, what normally happens, I wish I had an image of that. What normally happens is that I can literally slide my hand in between their back and the wall. So of course, the curve in the low back is a thing. And so I'm having them stretch up from the shoulders through the fingertips, trying to touch the ceiling to elongate the space in between hips and lower ribs. And then I'm having them pull it in, pull it in, pull it in, pull it in to try to press it into the wall. So I actually had already taken him through that sequence with what you're looking at this photo. That wasn't actually his beginning. That was kind of deeper in the session. So I'm first introducing them to everything they need to contract to support themselves in a position of stability. And again, it's a lot to try to synchronize and orchestrate and harmonize. So we take it bit by bit so that when they can find a feeling, they have it, then you can add on to that. And then they have it and you can add on to that. This person happens to be a yoga teacher and he has a high level of awareness, but he came with a very kyphotic spine and he's unsure how to work it. You'll see probably some other things I'm not sure what else I sent you, but so I'm going to start just by layering first just this and only this. Okay, perfect. Now add this on. Okay, perfect. Now add this on. Okay, perfect. Yeah. And hey, now how about this? So I did send you a video of the jump rope. And if it's not creating too much complexity, would you be able to pull up my jump rope video and put it side by side with him holding the stick here? Yeah. And I wonder if we can get a bigger picture of the video itself. Yeah, and it's fine if they're not side by side. Let's just show this. So I'm giving an introduction. The video has no sound and that's fine. So what I'm telling people is that I've completely, I'm going to call it liberated, opened up my shoulders. And by the way, therapeutically. So watch this. There's no stick in my hand. My index fingers are hooked together and I can take that in both directions, from the front to the back, from the back to the front. I can, keep the fingers hooked together and kind of step through it. And that particular move is called jump rope. So now let's go back to what I have him doing. Because what I want to tell you, do you remember in the very beginning, I said to you, people are going to look at this, they're going to look at that right there, they're going to look at everything I put up, and they're going to say, oh no, I can't do that, I could never do that, I can't learn from her, I'm not that advanced. And what I want to tell you is that that is the farthest thing from the truth. So when I take this student and I put a stick in his hand, I am actually going to use exactly, and I do mean exactly the same technique, except with a different approach, because the therapeutic remedy for the kyphotic spine and the impingement that he has in his frozen shoulder is identical to the technique I used to open, deepen, and strengthen my shoulders in the form of the jump rope video that I just showed you. So what matters is number one, form. Like, I am a huge technique girl. And by the way, if one person can do something, it's unique, rare, and extraordinary. But if it's teachable to the masses, then it's actually just technique. And what I'm teaching him here is exactly what you saw me do in the jump rope video that you just put up. So that's really cool to point out. So I had him with his body weight back in his heels and pitching the tailbone straight down toward the floor. I call that neutral, and everything surrounding the pelvis, stabilizing the pelvis, navel in and up, diaphragm in and up, crown stretch up. And all I'm having him do is push that stick away from him. I want to tell you that we started with a wooden dowel that was shorter. It was too short. Oh my gosh, this is so good. I think I sent you some more. There's a lot of content here. There's a lot to wrap our heads around. So I had him push that stick away from him. So the cues are going to be first and foremost with form and with breath always. And then I'm going to have him push it away from him, push from the shoulders through the fingertips. You're trying to push that stick to the ceiling and then relax and let it turn. But do you remember when I said to you, basically, I'll say it simply, the wider your hands are, the easier the turn. And then the closer, closer, closer your hands get, the deeper, deeper, deeper. It's the greater, greater challenge. So this is a nice and easy, slow, mindful, patient, compassionate, therapeutic process that I guide people through. And let me be clear, I do not want someone grabbing a stick and jerking it around. You absolutely could hurt yourself if you did not know how to do this properly. So let's just put that disclaimer in right now. But all I have him doing here is pushing it away from him and then seeing if he can relax and turn into it. And frankly, that broomstick was not long enough for him to be able to do it. Now I get to introduce you to another concept. We're going to start to layer more concepts. These are my big picture concepts in all of asana. And I want to tell you that doing anything one at a time is going to be easier, meaning less challenge, than doing the same thing both at once. And so as I was just taking him through a bit of a self-diagnostic, that was kind of like, that was a broomstick. It was the longest stick I could find, and he was unable to make the turn with that stick. So I said, okay, so and by the way, your client, their mind will immediately go to, oh yeah, I can't do it. No, yes you can. We just have to do it one at a time. And let me show you how. So when I saw that he was unable to make a turn, even with his hands as wide as, the broomstick is long, then I brought him down to the floor and I showed him how to work it one at a time. Because if he can get just one turning, just the right, just the right, just the right, just the right, and then separately, just the left, just the left, just the left, just the left. Now he's really getting some range of motion in there. Now he can go back and revisit that stick and try to do them both at once. So that's just another glimpse into my way of approaching and coaching, moving people towards deeper asana. So do you have the ones where he's on the floor? Yep, incredible. So this one is a technique that I have crafted called pigeon turns. And here's what it is. There's a posture called pigeon, king pigeon. There are different names for it. And it's a more advanced back bend in that it requires the turn of the shoulder. Now, I'm not asking him to do the posture. He's unable to do the posture currently. I'm using the posture as a tool to help him create space in his shoulder so that we can get them turning. And we're just doing one shoulder at a time. So what I'm actually having him do here, and by the way, there's a very advanced grip here. I call it a flip grip, and that's grab the top of the foot from the outside, palm face up. So it's a very specific grip. I had him widen his knee for that, because remember, the wider the hands are, in this case, the wider the knees are because your hand is holding onto your foot. So the width of the knees is setting the spacing of the hands. I hope I didn't say that too fast, but I have his knee nice and wide with his hip forward and down, and I've got him in a flip grip. So first there's that. And all I'm going to have him do is use the strength of his lower body to kick back while he relaxes his shoulder. I don't want him to pull with his arm, not at all. I'm trying to get space in that shoulder joint. So I'm going to have him kick back and figuratively let the kick pull the shoulder out of the body. It's obviously not displacing. It just means some words I can use to help him find a feeling or an observance and a realization that he can sense that there's some space there. So all I want him to do is kick back with the lower body and completely relax the upper body. So the hand is a hook and it clearly has a grip, but the arm and the shoulder are completely relaxing. So he's using his lower body strength to create upper body length, which is space. I'm having him kick back, and then I have him bend the knee, bring the heel quite close, turn toward it, look at it, bend the elbow. And at first the elbow is basically just going to kind of tap at about waistline. And then keep the foot in the hand, unwind, and go again. Kick back harder, relax more, kick back harder, relax more, get the space. And then bend the knee, bring the heel quite close, turn toward it, look at it. The elbow is bent at this point, start to make the turn. And so the turn just comes kind of incrementally, and eventually it starts to get a little farther forward. It comes wide out and around until the armpit is fully front facing and the shoulder is in full turn. That's a process. It doesn't typically happen in one session for sure, but it's also a therapeutic remedy. So everything I do is therapeutic. And are you doing it to heal an acute injury? Are you doing it to increase openness and range of motion in the body? So it's all therapeutic and it's all exact technique, but we might just approach it differently depending on the body, the condition of the body that we're doing it with. Okay, what would you like to add to this or comment on?
So would this be like homework for him? Would you be saying, I'd like you to do this certain amount of times a day or certain amount of times a week at a certain time?
Absolutely. I actually have a pad. I don't have one nearby, but I have a prescription pad. So it's very much old school guru. Here's your ailment. Here's your prescription. And so I literally assign asana to rehabituate the tone, to bring it into alignment, to heal it, open it, deepen it, strengthen it, and also even just kind of homework prescriptions for posture achievement, attainment, and execution.
Wow. And how fast would you expect people to see progressions, and then what progression do you take this one to?
So it's an interesting question. I think I want to tell you a story of, I'm not sure if it's okay to name her, and so I won't, and I'll call her the letter K. I'll call her K. And so I told you that I'm the head coach of the International Yoga Sports Federation, and that's a platform of really inspired and dedicated yoga practitioners that what I call dare to believe in themselves in the form of standing on the X. They have a dream of being able to do a certain set of postures, and they want to inspire other people and demonstrate mastery of central nervous system and receive the therapeutic benefit for which the posture is intended. And they basically just want to deepen the practice and inspire others to do the same. And there's a platform for that. And I'm the head coach of that. And so I have people that come to me as kind of like one of my full-time positions. And so Carrie came to me as someone who wanted to really become stronger, deeper, and more correct in her practice, which is what that is. And so when I started working with her, I don't think that she had made what I'm going to call top 10 yet into the finals. And the first time I started working with her within a season, she made top 10. I think she might have been number 7. I might be mistaken, but I think that she moved into top 10 and up to number 7. And then the year before last, she actually won first place, not only in the United States of America, but actually planet Earth in the world, live on stage in India, the motherland of yoga. She's won twice now, the world championship in the 50 plus division. 50 plus, I just said, 50 plus. That is another conversation for us to have. So there are people that I coach that are dedicated to making their practice stronger and deeper and more correct. And so they kind of work very, very consistently with precision. She literally creates a spreadsheet and keeps track of everything, because you cannot manage it if you do not measure it. And everything I teach you is literally measurable. You know when you're ready for more, you know when you're ready to progress. And when you're ready to progress, you know how to progress, and you can measure the progression. So 3 months is a number I'm going to pick out of thin air. If you will appreciate growth, openness, strengthening literally throughout the course of one session. But over the course of 3 months, I very casually like to say you can do nearly anything in 3 months. It's a little bit of a joke for me to say that. Things are only hard until they're not. That's all of life, including those postures that are supposedly the hardest postures in the world. There are a couple I didn't show you. There's this other one called Bow-Legged Mountain. And it's been kind of widely held that that's what they call the hardest posture in the world. And that's one that I've done on stage for a score, as well as that one-arm bow-legged peacock. And so the bottom line is I kind of laugh because you and I got to mention in the first podcast that we had that this is all about consciousness. The consciousness with which you conduct your practice is the same as the consciousness with which you conduct your life. You learn it on the mat, use it in the life. So these are all things that I incorporate into the practice, and to understand that it's not even spine centric. Yoga is mind centric. And so I'm working with people on the level of the mind. I'm working with them on the level of the body, and inevitably I'm working with them on the level of feelings and emotions. We kind of touched on that last time about how we stash emotions in our body. And by the way, sometimes those manifest into injuries that are decipherable messages as to where your spiritual work lies. And so I'm approaching these hearts, minds, spines, and lives on every level of their being. But at some point they have this intention to get at it and to receive on all these levels and to do the work and to track the work, and the progress comes. And by the way, not only does the progress come, that you become not just more flexible, but stronger, deeper, and more correct, which means more aligned, more spacious, which is far more therapeutic and energized. But also, the benefits are immeasurable on every level of being, right? So also more exacting, with the ability to stop, drop, and vortex and command everything you need and nothing that you don't. So you start to understand that your life is your meditation by design. You start to understand and be more accountable and more deliberate about the thoughts and about the commands that you send from the brain through the spine, and removing thought obstruction. And you start to unearth, I think we talked about it, I'm going to call it the mental states, the modifications of the mind. So did we get into self-control, determination, patience, faith, and concentration? And I think that we did, because we talked about concentration as being Concentration facilitates meditation, and meditation facilitates transformation. So concentration is a matter of being able to command everything you need and nothing that you don't in your mind. And there's no better way to learn how to concentrate as an adult than the standing balancing postures. So there's kind of a lot there. Do we have any more pictures?
No, this is the everything that you sent across previously.
Okay, beautiful. So I want to stop and just thank this student. I did ask for permission and he said absolutely, he was honored. I really want to thank him for sharing himself and his practice with us in the form of the photos, and most importantly, the talking points on the photos. So how about that? Let's recap some of the talking points. Let me kind of like tell you what I just told you.
Mm-hmm.
The first is that there are 5 ranges of motion of the spine. Most teachers, oh, hey, hi there, excellent. Most teachers will tell you there are 4. I am going to tell you, I say there are 5, and the reason I say there are 5 is because I consider traction a range of motion, and the reason I consider traction a range of motion is because it requires contraction. It's not a natural state. And if we are to categorize every single posture in the history of all postures according to range of motion of the spine, then we're going to call those stretching poses traction poses. So therefore, we have traction poses, forward compression, backward bending, lateral flexion, and twisting. And you and I talked about that before, and that was also fun to speak into. And that is that if I say to you, there really are only 5 poses. In the history of all poses, there really are only 5. If you organize them according to range of motion of the spine, then you say, well, how do you reconcile that? Because there are hundreds and hundreds of postures. And so what I like to say is there are 5 postures that exist according to range of motion of the spine, and all the multitude, the variations, all the versions of those 5 postures are simply a matter of what is your relationship to gravity. In other words, are you executing this posture from standing, from the ground up? Are you in an inversion? Is it from the top down? Are you doing it from the front to the back, from the back to the front? Like, what's your relationship to gravity, and how are you leveraging your extremities? How are you leveraging your extremities? So it's not about the posture. How will I say this? It's not just getting into the position. I like it like this. It's not just getting into the position. It's the work you do once you're in that position. That's where the magic happens. When we do these postures where we intertwine our extremities, it's because we're creating natural leverage. And the leverage is there for us to use once we're in that position. So that's obviously another facet of my teaching people why they're in that position, arms and with their legs, and what to do with their arms and their legs from that position, and so on and so forth. I also love to say that perhaps, because we've looked at pictures of some pretty complicated postures. So I also like to say that perhaps the complexity, the level of difficulty of any given posture can be organized by the number of opposing forces, equals and opposites that you're trying to synchronize. And by the way, that synchronization happens in the mind. So, yeah.
No, that's been great. I really appreciated that, and it's given a lot of food for thought from how I'd approach shoulder issues with people as well. I know you mentioned it earlier on at the beginning of the podcast, but if somebody wanted to learn more from you, or wanted any of your resources, where would they go, and what do you have to offer at that platform?
I appreciate your question. Let's hold it for 1 second, because when I said shoulders, I remembered you. And I remember, Chris, that you're serving on a very high level, because you already understand that this is not just about the body. This is not gymnastics. And that there is an emotional component to all of these parts in some way. And so if we could speak on the subject of shoulders represent your relationship with responsibility. So that really kyphotic spine, do you carry the weight of the world on your shoulders? Do you feel that the burden is solely yours to carry, or can you delegate, right? So shoulders have a certain meaning. And by the way, in the context of inversion, do you trust yourself to carry your own load? Like shoulders have a lot of spiritual, emotional messages. So I just wanted to bring that in also, since we're talking about frozen shoulder, stuck shoulder, different issues with respect to shoulder mobility. I had a student one time who called me because she had a frozen shoulder and she had had it for 2 years. And normally a frozen shoulder can release within 2 or 3 months, right? If you're working it properly. So that alone was curious. And when I started to really receive her in her entirety and, you know, just kind of ask her questions about her life, she told me that 10 years ago, the other shoulder was frozen and it also lasted for 2 years. And I'm going to tell you that is not common. So we really needed to delve into the spiritual symbology of what shoulders mean and where the messages lie in your body. So there's that as well. So I like to have that on the table in all of the talking points. And so thank you. All roads lead to the website, kimtangyoga.com. And I've already described to you that there's yoga, spirit, and by the way, Yakashala, which is where all of our in-person events take place. I have, let me call it out specifically. First of all, I have a video platform, and one of them is called Spine, All Spine, Part 1, from traction through drop back. And everything we touched on today is vastly expanded upon with education and homework videos on that platform. There's also another one in a different category. It's called KT, as in Kim Tang, KT drills. And there's one called shoulder rotations and pigeon turns. And that's where I teach people safely and therapeutically how to use that stick or make that grab to get some space in the shoulder that they then can turn into. So actually everything we talked about today is available in its very, very expanded form on video already on my platform. I do private sessions, and that's online. And I do like to have my eyes on the individual for sure. I have in-person events, and I'm part of this is important, I'm part of a global certification. It's a collaboration with some other senior international yoga instructors in a platform called Yoga Sport World. And we have satellites in Prague, Mexico City, Australia, and the San Francisco area of Northern California. I actually am going to have one here in the Joshua Tree area in January of 2024. So anyone can learn from me, and there are any number of ways to learn from me. I appreciate you inviting me on your show, and I would love to be a resource for you. So I'll say it again, I hope you'll invite me back, and there's nothing that we cannot talk about. If you live in a musculoskeletal system in a field of gravity, I'm talking to you. So thank you for letting me. Thank you for receiving me, and thank you for inviting me.